Is home TV all set? Okay, great. All right, it is 6:30 and welcome to the Charter Township of Meridian Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Today is September 23rd, 2020. It is 6:30 and I'm now going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Our first item on our agenda for tonight will be to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? I have a motion from Member Field Foster.
Second.
Second by Member Wazinski. All right. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote here. Member Field Foster.
Yes.
This is a motion to approve. Yes. Member Wazinski.
Yes.
Member Hendrickson.
Yes.
Member Kulhanek.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Next item on our agenda will be corrections and approval of the minutes. And do I have a motion for that? Member Wazinski?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Any second? Second by Member Hendrickson. Any discussion regarding the minutes? I actually have one piece that I will add as a correction. I notice as marked present is Chairman Soar, members Field Foster, Hendrickson, Kulhanek, and Wazinski, and Brian Shorkey. Unfortunately, we did not have Member Hendrickson with us last time, so I just moved that be corrected in the minutes, please. And based on that correction, let's go ahead and take a vote. Member Field Foster?
Yes.
Member Wazinski?
Yes.
Member Hendrickson?
Yes.
Member Kulhanek?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And next on our agenda for the evening will be communications, of which I don't see any supplied in our packet here. And so, unless staff has received any communications, I don't see any there. Next, we will move on to unfinished business. Is there anything or any discussion? Any unfinished business anybody is aware of? All right. In that case, we will move on to new business for the evening. And new business is ZBA case number 19-11-13-1, East Lansing Lodge Incorporated. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Chapman to present.
Thank you. I'm gonna share my screen here. Give me 1 second. Oops. Can everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so this is a request from East Lansing Lodge Inc. They're proposing to construct a 174 square foot decorative canopy addition on the west side of the existing hotel located at 2736 Grand River. That's the location. So a little bit of a procedure here. This is a request first to rehear a previously denied variance back in November of 2019. The applicant was denied variances. So they are coming back seeking for your approval to rehear based on newly discovered evidence or proof of changed circumstances. And then if you decide to rehear, then it's a request for an addition to a non-conforming structure. So a little bit about the previous request. In November, the applicant proposed to add a 288 square foot porte cochere addition to the building, exceed the 70% impervious surface coverage, deviate from the required maneuvering lane width for drive aisles throughout the parking lot, and waive the installation of curb and gutter. And also the applicant reapplied, but withdrew the application before the January 8th, 2020 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, and that would have been to rehear that previous case as well. So The site plan was revised and the applicant reapplied and now shows only the decorative canopy on the front. So the request for the impervious surface, drive aisle widths, curb and gutter are no longer being requested. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys to discuss on whether or not you want to rehear the case.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Is the applicant or can we hear from the applicant at this point regarding their, regarding this new information? Is that part of our procedure?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can hear from the applicant.
Okay, fantastic. Is the applicant or an applicant's representative here tonight that wants to give us some more information regarding rehear? We're just at this moment talking about rehearing this case and the information that perhaps has changed between the prior meeting where you were denied and this current meeting.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Nofar. I'm with the ownership group of the company. Just want to make sure, can you all hear me?
Yes, Mr. Nofar, can you just state your name and your address for the public record, please?
Sure, Ryan Nofar. Do you want a business address or?
That's fine.
Business address is 2736 East Grand River Avenue, East Lansing, 48823.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
So I wasn't, I actually had my architect at the last ZBA where it had gotten denied. When it had gotten denied, we went back to the brand, the franchise, which is Choice Hotels, and tried to do something kind of on a smaller scale. The brand is the one that is really pushing for some sort of overhang at the entrance. This is right outside the lobby where cars can drive up and, provide some protection for unloading luggage, if it's raining, and also to give the entrance, a distinct look, as many hotels have at the entrance. So in working with the franchise, we agreed on a smaller scale. Instead of having, basically a new structure, it'd kind of be this decorative overhang that you see on many commercial properties that it won't give full coverage over the vehicle, but it can give half coverage, basically, on the passenger side, or if the car's coming from the other direction on the driver's side. But it's good to provide, going from an economy to a mid-scale hotel, it's good to have that sort of feature at the entrance of the property.
Sorry, I was muted. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I don't know if any of you have driven past the property recently. We've put a ton of work into it, ton of upgrades. We've been at the property. Our ownership group has been there for a little over a year now. We're very excited for the potential of the property. We are supposed to be rebranding on October 6th. So that's when we're supposed to be going up with the new name. I think this would be a very nice feature for the property. Again, many mid-scale properties do have something like this, and it'll be very helpful for the guests. Also, it adds the curb appeal as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nofar. Is there anybody else that's in the waiting room or that would like to speak on this case this evening before we get into our board time?
Chairman, sir, there's no one in the attendee area that would like to comment.
Great, thank you so much. On that note, I am going to close public comment then and go into our board time for this, for our discussion regarding rehearing this case. So board members, please feel free. We can ask questions of staff and of Mr. Nofar. I have been told we can refer to minutes from the previous meeting that were included in our packet in order to determine whether or not we should rehear this. Is there anything anybody would like to get started with or like to add? Member Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to either Keith or Mark regarding procedurally in our ordinance. It appears as though we require a 1-year cooling period between requests for variances that have been denied. And so, I suppose my first question would be, it appears as though our first matter of business would be to determine whether or not any substantive changes have been made. So would that require a motion? Would that require us to just have a discussion about it first? I mean, procedurally, what would be the process there?
You would have to vote on it. Again, if they waited more than 1 year, they could have came back and just asked for it. The ordinance does allow an exception for if it hasn't been a year. The zoning board of appeals can determine based on change of circumstances or proof of new evidence, and it would require a vote to rehear this case.
Okay, thank you. Then I guess my next question would be to the applicant. Can you give us a bit more in terms of what has changed since November of last year, other than your internal discussions with your corporate, with corporate?
So the submittal, the Board of Cashier, if we went with the original idea, there's a lot more involved, structural columns. The columns would be sticking out into the parking lot. This would be none of that. I mean, there would be some structural support inside the existing columns that is not going to, get into the parking lot because they're already existing. This is just an overhang, a canopy. So really the whole idea of what we want, to cover the guests has changed. It's completely different, really.
Okay. So then as a follow-up for Director Kieselbach, when we are talking about circumstances, right? I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of the definition of circumstances here. Because it sounds as though what the applicant is telling me is that the request has changed. And when I read the word circumstances, to me, that means that something has changed with the property or with the proposal, or with the property really, in order to make the decision that this board made back in November of last year would require a change. Can you help me to understand if my understanding of the word circumstances is consistent with application by this board over time?
Yeah, the ordinance doesn't directly define circumstances, but in the past, what the ZBA has considered, if they redesigned, if they've changed the amount of the variance, or in this case, maybe the height of what was being requested, then they've taken it under consideration. Is it enough of a change to rehear the case for that? But as I said, we don't define circumstance.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I've got for now.
Thank you, Member Hendrickson. Anybody else have questions? Member Field Foster, go ahead.
I don't have a question.
Okay.
If somebody else has a question, I can wait.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
So based on what Director Kieselbach said, I think reading the minutes from the last hearing and having sat through the last hearing, I believe that this resubmittal is significantly different than what we looked at before. There were several requests for variance on the last application, and this literally is a completely different submission for this smaller canopy. So as a result of that, I would be fine moving forward with it.
Okay. Thank you, Member Field Foster. Any of our other board members have Member Wazinski? Go ahead.
I would concur with Member Field Foster. There was variances for parking, curb and gutter, impermeable surface, all based on the design of the previous awning and or porte cochere. So I see this as significantly different, and I would support in hearing this case.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Member Kohanic. Hello?
Go ahead, member
Can
Cohen.
you, oh, okay. I just wanted to associate myself with those two comments. It does look like a substantially different application. And so I agree as well. I'd be willing to move forward with this.
Thank you very much for that comment. And the chair would agree. I was not at the previous meeting, but based on the minutes and based on what I'm seeing here, I do see a significant change. And I think that we're not, this portion of our meeting is not to determine whether that change is significant enough to grant a variance, but rather whether it's significant enough to rehear that portion of the case. So with that said, I suppose that we will go ahead and take a vote. It sounds like discussion has run its course. So I will go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Director Kieselbach, did you have an?
I don't, maybe I missed it. You need a motion and a second.
Okay, we need a motion. All right, in that case, Member Hendrickson,
I move that we rehear case number 19-11-13-1 for 2736 Grand River Avenue, East Lansing, Michigan 48823.
thank you very much.
Support.
Okay, support by Member Wazinski. Any other discussion on the motion? Member Hendrickson?
I'll just concur. I did not chime in earlier, but I'll concur that this is a materially different request and concur with my colleagues.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, motion on the floor is to rehear case 19-11-13-1. Member Field Foster,
Sorry, yes.
Member Wazinski,
Yes.
Member Hendrickson,
Yes.
Member Kulhanick,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we will go ahead and rehear that case. On that note, Mr. Chapman, do you want to take over
Yeah.
our screens
gonna
again?
Go back to my screen here.
Thank you.
Okay, so as previously stated, the applicant is now proposing to construct a 174 square foot decorative canopy. And that's, yes. So a little bit about the project. The existing hotel was constructed in 1959 and is considered non-conforming because it does not meet the front yard setback of 100 feet from the center line of Grand River Avenue. Currently, the building is located only 50 feet from the center line of Grand River. So the applicant is intending to add the decorative canopy to the building, which is approximately 29 feet in width and 6 feet in depth, and will be 10 feet in height. The addition is approximately 80 feet from the center line of Grand River Avenue. So any addition to non-conforming non-residential structure requires approval from the ZBA. That's all I have.
Well, you answered my question, so thank you for that, Mr. Chapman. Okay, on that note, would the applicant like to speak again regarding this case as far as our approval goes? And that approval is based on those 8 criteria that we will go through one by one to determine whether or not we find enough cause to grant the variance. So the applicant is free to have the floor again if you'd like. If not, we can go right into board time. It's up to you.
Well, I think I got most of the information off a few minutes ago. If you guys have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer any.
Okay. If yeah, we will definitely be I'm sure board members will have questions for you. So on that note, I'm just going to go ahead and let us get into our board time. If there's no one else in the waiting room or any other participants that are looking to speak regarding this case. Doesn't appear to be. So, all right, we will go into board time. For our board members present, same as any regular variance application, we will now look at our 8 criteria. and determine based on those 8 criteria whether or not this variance shall pass. So, anyone want to get started? Member Field Foster.
So I've got a question for the applicant. Are there going to be any additional lights on that canopy, any other safety fixtures that will be on it when someone's entering the building?
Yes. So we have, we've already installed a couple up-down lights on the columns. The canopy, if we were to proceed, is going to have some can lighting underneath it. So it would be entirely illuminated for the safety and direction of the guests driving through.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Member Hendrickson, go ahead.
Question for the applicant. Can you operate this facility without the canopy?
So one of the, technically speaking, I mean, yes, it's yes and no. So it's a franchise requirement. It's in our property improvement plan. And it's something that under our contract they want us to add. We can, I mean, a guest going to their room really doesn't have, you know, renting a room to a guest really doesn't have much to do with the overhang, but it's more so compliance with the franchise.
Thank you.
Sure.
I will, just to reiterate, especially as we do have a couple of new members this year, that unfortunately we cannot make our decision. And I know those who read through the board minutes will have seen Chair Beauchesne say the same thing I'm going to say. The unfortunate thing is for this applicant, and we completely understand branding. However, because the variance stays with the property in perpetuity, regardless of the brand, regardless of the owner, we cannot consider the branding as being part of that variance criteria. So I just want to remind our members that when looking at those criteria, we cannot take branding into consideration. We can take public safety and those types of things into consideration, but branding is not one of the things that we can. We will deal with those kind of things. We've dealt with those cases in the past couple months as well. So we just have to remember that unfortunately brands do have standards, but so do townships. So our townships will always supersede a branding aspect, so to speak. Does any of our other members have any other questions or discussion, or would you like to get into the criteria? Looks like we're getting into criteria. All right, I'm gonna go for it then, and we'll just get started. The first criteria is unique circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district. I would go out there with unique circumstances because when you look at this property, you literally, I just wrote down what Mr. Chapman said, which was anything that you change on this property needs a variance, barring, I think, probably paint color. Any other thing that you want to do to the outside of this building, because it is non-conforming, is going to require variance. So based on that, I believe that this will fully justify it being a unique circumstance. And I do not believe they are self-created. So that would be our criteria 1 and 2. Check, check. Strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties. Here is where we're going to get into some questions. Because as Member Hendrickson pointed out, the practical difficulty is that can this business operate without this awning, this overhang? Is there practical difficulties? And anybody that wants to help me out with that one, because that's where I'm having a hard time. Member Hendrickson, go ahead.
This property's been operated as a hotel in the past. It's been operated without an overhang, and it's been operated to varying levels of success. But I don't believe that the lack of an overhang has anything to do with their ability to market themselves and do, be an effective business. As the chair pointed out, we don't take into consideration the concerns of the brand because this is a more permanent, our decision is more permanent than any one owner. And so for those reasons, I believe that the criteria number 3 and 4, that this would not pass those criteria. I don't believe that they do.
So,
Go ahead, Member Field Foster.
okay, sorry, my internet is going in and out, so if I hang up, I apologize. So, I struggled with 3 and 4 as well, and given the amount of work and change that has gone into this, I was trying to come up with something that could justify a practical difficulty. And so one of the reasons I was asking about the light is the whole safety component, also weather. So when you're thinking about Michigan weather, whether it's rain, whether it's snow, whatever it happens to be, and then you consider perhaps you've got individuals who are disabled or elderly who are coming into the hotel. Having that type of overhang will be extremely helpful for those individuals actually going to that place. And so I think as a result, I'm looking at it from a public safety type of feature, or even, just public welfare, having that limited overhang with those extra lights to provide that type of security would be something I could say would actually make that meet the number 4 criteria.
Okay, you can meet the number 4 criteria, and it sounds like criteria number 5, granting the variance is the minimum action that would make possible the use of land or structure in a manner which is not contrary to the public interest and which would carry out the spirit of this zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. I would agree with you on that. As from a substantial justice, public safety perspective, and from the sheer amount of work that's gone into really shrinking this down to being an overhang, to not being a giant structure, to everything else being within, our limits here as far as code goes, I do see this being a minimum action. I would still struggle with criteria number 3, but I do think that that we could perhaps make that case for number 3 based on kind of as a public safety, as a not necessarily for branding purposes or for aesthetics, but rather as a safety concern as far as weather, or for as you said, the lighting and things like that. I'm just going to go back through the rest of the criteria then on that note. Criteria 6 is granting the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land or the essential character in the vicinity of the property. In all honesty, we know that it would improve all of the improvements on this property are going to improve the area surrounding it. So I think we could all agree that that one certainly qualifies. Criteria number 7, the conditions pertaining to the land or structure are not so general or recurrent in nature as to make the formulation of a general regulation for such conditions practicable. And as we said right at the beginning of this discussion, this is such a unique location and such a unique building, being that it's non-conforming at this point, that I don't believe that 7, yes, I believe we can satisfy 7. Criteria number 8, granting the variance will be generally consistent with public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. I can certainly say that I know that the township wants to work with its businesses. We want to grow and continue to grow as a township with our small business community. So I do believe that this is consistent with public interest. However, I just am right back to number 3 and 4. So I'd love to hear some more discussion on 3 and 4 from any of our board members that want to chime in. Member Wazinski.
Of course, yeah, I struggled with 3 and 4 as well. The other ones are slam dunk. But I also, branding's not, certainly not something to consider. But I do go back to that public safety, and I think of, particularly ADA compliance and making sure that it's safe when people are getting in and out of their vehicle and they're getting luggage in and out of their vehicle. Does this provide a safety feature for folks that are either visiting or residents that are using that property? So I do, I feel like I could make the case for 4 certainly, and potentially 3 just by the fact that it will be lit up. It will provide protection from the weather, and especially for any of our disabled folks that may be using that.
Thank you, Member Wazinski. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Don here. Hello?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I want to thank, in particular, Member Field Foster for her summary there. I think, frankly, she changed my vote as I was looking at this and review this, and largely convinced me. I think oftentimes of these awnings is a decorative feature, but there's a practical aspect to it as well, and that safety aspect, the ability to load and unload, in at least a somewhat dry surface. There seems to be a pretty minimal awning, by the way. It's certainly not excessive, and I don't know. I feel convinced based on that public safety explanation that criteria 3 and 4 are met. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Kulhanik. I appreciate that. Anyone else? I would just say, to add to that, I would agree. I do definitely feel that we can definitely make the case. I don't know if it's the strongest case, but we can definitely make the case that this is a piece for public safety and for the interest of the any of the clientele that would be staying at the hotel. And this would go a far way to addressing kind of the exterior of the building. But I'm still struggling a little bit. Member Hendrickson, where are you at? How are you feeling about this one?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was originally feeling as though this did not meet 3 and 4, and I appreciate the points made by Member Field Foster and Member Wazinski. I think my issue is that as I look at the parking for this piece of land and for this proposed new variance, the balcony extends, I think 10 feet is what I'm seeing here, off of the building. And the parking spaces that are ADA compliant are quite a bit further away from the building and exposed to the elements. And so I'm envisioning a disabled patron of one of these businesses. Yes, if they were to pull up into this area, and if this had overhang parking, maybe I could make an argument to say, sure, this is a safety issue that we need to address. But the fact of the matter is that, we're also asking them to park even further away in an area that's not covered. And so it doesn't solve the problem. And if it doesn't solve the problem, I ask myself, do we need to approve this to maybe partially solve the problem? And I keep coming back to no. I just don't think that the difficulties that, I mean, I think the public safety argument is a good one for criteria 8. I don't know that it's a good one for criterias 3 and 4, right? Public safety is in the public's interest. And I think that that argument is one that we should consider when looking at criteria 8. But for the purposes of operating the business, I don't believe that the practical difficulties that arise from not having an awning exist in this case. And the reason I know that is because the business has existed, maybe not with this ownership, but the business has existed for years before this. So I just don't see any reason that practical difficulties have sprung up overnight. And frankly, I didn't hear anything from the applicant to suggest that there were either. And I believe, I mean, maybe this is just a philosophical issue with the way we hear cases, but I believe the applicant has to make an argument to us that these criteria should be met, rather than we having to create the arguments for them. So for those reasons, I do not believe that criteria 3 and 4 are met. And I'm willing to ask the applicant as a question, can you provide a better argument for why there are practical difficulties than simply corporate wants us to brand it this way? Because we can't take that into consideration. So I will pose that as a question again to the applicant. Can you convince us that there are indeed practical difficulties by not having this awning?
Thank you. So quite honestly, I didn't know that the whole franchise thing couldn't come into play. Because if you look at my answers, a lot of them are talking about franchise and getting approvals and all that. I would have approached this a completely different way if had I known that that wasn't a practical difficulty. The points of the way I kind of think about this is, our ownership group has other hotel properties, and most of them have, a full porte cochere and some sort of protection for the guests coming in. It is when there's pouring rain or snow, it provides some clear ground, especially with snow. So if there's ongoing snow, obviously there's salt and snow removal, but in the middle of a snowstorm, it's very important, that the customer can, be dropped off somewhere out of their vehicle. I mean, obviously if it's one customer pulling in, they got to park their car, yes. But this just gives more clear pavement, I guess, walking up to the building, whether it's snow or rain, more so snow in Michigan conditions. So I think the safety aspect, does go a long way. Safety and, convenience, security for the guest.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Nofar. I have another question regarding that as well, just to be clear, and maybe Mr. Chapman can put back up the picture of the exterior of the building. If I'm looking at this correctly, the overhang goes to the office, but then also you can still walk then covered to all of the lower and upper units from that overhang. Is that correct? Can you clarify that for me, Mr. Nofar?
So the overhang is the kind of charcoal colored looking structure. It covers the vestibule, like the area of the sidewalk just outside the vestibule, and a portion just to the right of the vestibule. So the guest rooms already have some coverage, but this is more so to provide coverage a little bit into the parking lot for entering and exiting purposes.
I guess what I'm asking as far as safety goes is you can, you're under the canopy and then you can then walk under
Oh,
the
yes,
overhang.
correct, yes.
Okay, just
Yeah,
to be,
yeah,
just to be clear, so that it is offering that full safety coverage regarding, they, you could essentially be covered. I think what Mr. Hendricks pointed, I'm sorry, Mr. Hendrickson pointed out, excuse me, was that the ADA spaces were not located next to the building. I mean, I see why and how you've had to change those things. But in theory, someone could be dropped off there and still be walked covered and safely make it to their room with that coverage between the canopy and then the covered balcony and covered walkway on the lower level. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if a guest gets dropped off underneath, they're going from coverage to coverage. There wouldn't be a gap in, um, you know, open air. Well, not open air, but coverage from once they're under it. Correct, overhang, yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or discussion based on what we just heard from the applicant? I do tend to, I am struggling with Green 4 still. I do see a safety and I do see a convenience factor. The question is whether or not those two things are practical difficulties would be one. And I think that very kind of loosely, I could even justify criteria number 3, the strict interpretation and enforcement of this literal terms and provisions of the chapter would result in practical difficulties, meaning that it is a challenge. We do expect these things when we go to, we would like to walk into some place and be covered, and particularly in our climate. However, I still am struggling then with number 4, that the alleged practical difficulties, which will result from a failure to grant the variance, would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose, based on what member Hendrickson pointed out about the fact that this has been a hotel at this location for decades without a overhang and coverage. And that the simple fact that it has been in business for that long, and this has remained, that is the challenge I'm having with it not being used, preventing the owner from using the property for the permitted purpose, because we know that this business model works in this location rather, because it has worked for many years. So I am still very much struggling with number 4. So I don't know if anyone has any further discussion or wants to make a motion. But Member Field Foster.
So I completely, and I struggled with this as well. And Member Hendrickson is correct. It is not our job to make the case for the applicant. I do, as I, again, was thinking about it, the one thing that comes to mind is that this property was built back in the 50s. Am I still, did I freeze up? Okay, I think I did.
A little bit.
And as a result of that, I think the expectations of what came with a hotel motel property were extremely different. And over the course of time has changed. I mean, during that time, we have made accommodations for the disabled community and others. And as a result, clearly that property that was there before has gone into disrepair. I mean, driving by it, it's not like one of the most popular places to stay. And as a result of that, you've got a lot of other hotels that are building in the community that have these different features to them. And while, of course, an economic argument is not ours to make, I just think those are considerations as well when you're looking at this property. And as far as the parking spaces not being close to the building, at the end of the day, Director Kiesebach put it I mean, right there in front of us. This building is only 50 feet away from the center line. There is nothing that can take place on this building without a variance being. As a result of that, something's got to give. I mean, but for the fact that it was non-conforming to begin with, they would be able to put this up.
Member Field Foster, I think you froze there at the end, but I did hear, but for
But for the fact that the building is non-conforming and so close already to the center line, they would probably be able to put this up without coming to us.
very good point. Thank you. So what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm overstating or overspeaking for you, Member Field Foster, is essentially making a case for criteria number 4, or I'm sorry, criteria number 3, the practical difficulty being to be a modern property, regardless of branding, to be a modern motel, hotel, mid-level place that people come to stay, that these are some of the requirements now that we are seeing that this building just could not have had back in that time, because those weren't requirements at that time that we expected from a property of like this. Does anybody want to discuss that? Or yeah, Member Hendrickson, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that that's a point well taken. That these are sort of the modern amenities that we expect from a hotel or a motel. But that being said, they knew what this property was when they bought it. You know, and I don't expect them maybe to have been measuring to the center line of the road, perhaps, and perhaps that may have been an error. But the fact of the matter is that you can't exist without it. You know, this may just be a different kind of hotel than what you're seeing being newly built in this area. And again, if it was a matter of like, this isn't ADA compliant, and they're asking for a variance to do something to bring it in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, maybe so. Maybe that would be a better argument. But again, this is an aesthetic change for the most part. And the rationale provided by the applicant was that this is an aesthetic change, at least in the application materials. This is an aesthetic change requested by corporate. And so again, if this was like, hey, we have to do these things to be compliant with the law, and in this case, township ordinance is conflicting with the law, with federal law, I would say, by all means, let's do it, because we want to be compliant with the ADA. But that's just not the case here. So I don't know that I've been convinced that these are practical difficulties sufficient to meet criteria number 4, even still.
Anyone else? Member Wazinski, go for
Well,
it.
I just want to touch on another point that Member Field Foster made. I appreciate what you're saying, Member Hendrickson. You're right that the applicant came to us with an aesthetic reasoning. However, looking at it as a township professional or a township official, how do we protect and make sure our residents and those visiting are safe? The one thing that was mentioned was that quite honestly, I've lived here for 20 years, and yes, the structure itself has run as a hotel, but not successfully. So I've seen it change hands 3 times since I've been here, and it's never been in a condition that was inviting for people to want to use that building. Not to say that this is the one and only thing that that would cause that, but I see that as an impediment to maybe this, the what do we say, the practical difficulty to the permitted use. I did want to touch on that a little bit.
I think that's good perspective as far as looking at this and taking out the brand, so to speak, right, and seeing it as a business and looking at it from a perspective of public safety. Is that I very much hear what Member Hendricks is saying about us not making the case for the applicant. However, we need to look at all the criteria. So this is, I would say, and Member Field Foster and Member Wazinski that have been with me on this board for a couple of years now can probably concur that despite not wanting to make the case for the applicant, we do have to find what we see as the governing board, what we see to be things that fit into these criteria. So while I would hope that applicants are more, have more awareness, as Mr. Nofar said, he didn't realize that branding was something that we weren't going to take into consideration. And I hope that he understands now why we can't, but that is something that that is our responsibility to come to. So I do want to reiterate that very much we hope that the applicant does come to it, but we still have to make a decision, not necessarily just based on what those words say. That's why we do give people a chance to talk. We get a chance to discuss. We get a chance for the applicant to discuss, and for us to be able to speak with staff and really get to the meat and really get as much information as we can to make the best decision that we can. So I think in that regard, we do have to look at it as a whole and as a body, and what we've come up with in this determination, investigation, however you want to call it, discussion. So that being said, I am starting to move my needle a little bit more towards being able to, I can see public safety for sure. I can see some practical difficulties, and I'm still about whether this prevents the owner from using the property for its permitted purpose. I think that's where I'm starting to move a bit based upon some of the information that some of our members have shared. Member Wazinski's right. This property is turned over a lot. We want to see it be successful, right? We want to see it be something that the community really can be proud of. And is this it? I don't know. I don't know if this is the magic the magic pill for this building or this business necessarily, but yeah. Member Hendrickson, go ahead.
I think we would be hard pressed to find an example of a hotel that was made or broken by the fact that they have an awning. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's the question of number 4, right? Will this hotel be successful if they have an awning, or fail if they don't have an awning? And I just can't make that logical leap.
Better unmute myself before I start talking again. Okay, well, it feels like we are all kind of stuck on that 4th criteria, or not. We are certainly able to discuss more if anybody wants to put forward a motion, if they can meet the criteria. Otherwise, we can continue discussing number 4. Member Wazinski?
Unfortunately, I don't see a motion drafted in here, but I could improvise and move to approve the variance based on the 8 criteria as presented by the applicant and discussion on the board.
I think we have a motion to approve. We do have on, let's see, what page is it in our packet? Page 14, I think, of our packet. It is section 86-6182 to approve the variance from non-conforming structures other than single-family structures may be altered, expanded, or modernized without prior approval of the zoning board of appeals, etc. Do we have any support on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a second from member Kohanek. Don, will you pronounce your name for me again? Because I feel like I butcher it every time and I'm so sorry.
You were doing it perfectly. Every time
Okay.
you say it, I think to myself, she must know somebody with the name. But for what it's worth, I answer to any pronunciation. I'm not bothered by it at all. But you have been perfect.
Okay,
every
good.
time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, we have support from member Kohanek, and if we want to go ahead and discuss, now would be the time to do so. Member Hendrickson, go ahead.
Thank you. I think we've talked about this in circles quite a bit, and I think that's healthy. But I'll be opposing this motion because I do not believe that the variance requested provides adequate practical difficulties that would prevent its use for its permitted purpose.
Thank you, and I do understand that, and I appreciate you stating that as well for our minutes and for our record. I will just go on record also in saying that I while it is very thin, I do believe that I can make a case that this would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for permitted purpose rather, based on the fact that, yes, we know that this can exist as a hotel. We've seen it many years. Successfully is another point altogether, and I think member Wazinski pointed that out very well. I would say based on other properties in our township and based on other properties within our community that I do believe in order to use the property not only as permitted but successfully as permitted, and maybe that's stretching that criteria a bit, that this would qualify as bringing this into the 21st century as a property within our township that can be used and used well by all guests and employees. So on that note, if there's no further discussion by any of our members, I'm going to go ahead and get a vote going. All right. Well, this is a motion to approve a variance for ZBA case number 19-11-13-1, East Lansing Lodge Incorporated. Member Field Foster,
Yes.
member Hendrickson,
No.
member Kohanek,
Yes.
member Wazinski,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So your variance has been approved. And I do thank you, Mr. Nofar, for coming and being with us tonight. I also, let's see, is there anything else we have here? And let's see, I believe that's our only business for this evening. So if, let's see, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment this evening?
Thank
Anyone?
you, everybody, for your time. Just wanted to say that.
We appreciate that, Mr. Nofar. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for coming to our board this evening.
Sure. Thank you.
And if that's it, I will close public comment. I don't see anybody else waiting to make a comment. So I can go to board member comments. Is there any board member comments? Member Hendrickson, go ahead.
Thank you. I did just want to make one comment. I know that our staff works incredibly hard to prepare us for these meetings, and am very appreciative of that. I think it might be helpful if and I don't know what interaction the applicants have with staff prior to coming before this body for the purposes of us hearing cases. It might be worthwhile if there's a brief discussion about what can and cannot be considered by this body when rendering our decision. I think we may, in this one case, have benefited from the applicant being made aware, for example, that we couldn't take branding into account because they would have been able to make a more compelling case on their own, which I know I definitely needed to hear from them in order to have made my decision a yes on that motion as opposed to a no. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe Mark will tell me that, you know, they're not allowed to interfere with cases brought against or brought and before this body. But if that's possible, I think it would certainly be helpful. And I thank everyone for a spirited discussion on that. I know that's, you know, it's never easy to be on the other side of it, but I appreciate everyone's comments. And I think that perhaps the best argument was made by Member Field Foster when talking about some of the points that she made. So I thank you all for that.
Thank you, Member Hendrickson. Anybody else have anything that they want to add?
I just want to say, I truly enjoy listening to all the different arguments, and just to say to Member Hendrickson, I don't know what you do for a living, but you definitely have a life in either politics or law, because you ask some incredibly good questions and make some great arguments.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Member Field Foster. And the chair would just like to add that I appreciate all of the patience. I appreciate the discussion, and I actually really enjoy hearing from different people. And I know that this may be a new process for two of our members, but you guys are doing great. And I think that we've made some good decisions. We always make great decisions, right? As ex-chair Boshane would say. But I really do very much appreciate everyone chiming in, and that is our process. You know, it's can be messy, and it's okay to not agree. That's the point. that's why we get to vote. So I do very much appreciate Member Hendrickson, you staying true to those criteria and what your interpretation of them are and how you saw the case. That is exactly what we have to do. So you did that well. I mean, that's it. If you don't see it, you don't see it. So on that note, if there's no further discussion, I would just like to thank everyone for coming to our Zoning Board of Appeals meeting this evening. All right. Okay, on that note, we are officially adjourned, and Courtney, you're out of here on time.
Thank you.
All right, everybody have a great evening, and take good care.
Thank
Bye,
you, you
everyone.
too.
Thanks.